I'd like to call the meeting to order. Again, as you know, we are still under the governor's orders to suspend having meetings in person. So if you would like to join this meeting, you can either access us through the Zoom link that is on our agenda. You can join us by telephone at 877-853-5257 and enter the meeting ID 915-2544-2843. And then if you have any concerns or comments during the meeting, or preferably after the meeting, because Lene has enough to do during the meeting, please send them to Lene Handy at lhandy@watertown-mass.gov. Thank you. Lene, would you be kind enough to call the roll?
Yes, I would.
Thank you.
John Bockian.
Here.
Jason Cohen.
Here.
Bob DeRico.
Here.
Dennis Duff.
Here.
Alan Gallagher.
Here.
Mark Kreskevich.
Here.
Maria Rose.
Here.
Susan Steele.
Here.
Elodia Thomas.
Here. Thank you. I've asked Sam, who is our fabulous tech from the cable station, to do the same thing that we've done in the last few meetings, is just keep us all on unmute, because we seem to work well as kind of having conversation together. And, you know, it's not so stilted. It feels more like a meeting. So that's how we'll continue. We're very lucky tonight to have Larry with us, Larry Field. He's a new senior planner, well, relatively new. He came on in July. One of his responsibilities is housing. And this man is super duper. He just churns out material and information. And, you know, we had a kind of informational front porch meeting with him, Dennis, Mark Kreskevich. Who am I missing here? Dennis Duff, myself, Lene, Larry. Missing Alan. Great, Alan. Oh, God. How can I do that? Slap me. Anyway, it was just really just a conversation about housing in Watertown. And then we asked him if he could put some kind of presentation for the entire committee together, so that we're all kind of having the same base of information as we move forward, which I think is kind of important. So, Larry, I'm looking for your face up there. I know that Sam was going to arrange for you to have screen share. And have you met everybody, Larry? Do you know us all? Or shall we go around and introduce it? Well, you saw us when we did the roll.
So I was on your meeting, so I have some sense of the folks around the table.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So without further ado, why don't I let you roll? And just so you all know, you saw the schedule. I put Larry first so that he doesn't have to be here the entire evening. He's already had a long day, but thank you very much, Larry. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen.
Wow.
And hopefully all of that will work.
Yep.
Terrific.
Got it?
Got it.
Beautiful.
And you see the whole screen is taken up by the presentation except for your faces, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Great.
Right.
So thank you for having me. It feels a little daunting to be before a group of people who have made Watertown, you know, their civic responsibility and know so much about Watertown when I've only been working here for 2 months. But I will do my enterprising best to do this presentation on affordable housing in Watertown. So 3 quick observations. This presentation is designed to be a reference. So there is more material there than really can be covered in this conversation. That's okay, because you'll have it to go back to. Second, please ask questions as I go. And third, the source for much of this data comes from the American Community Survey. So I want to just say a word about that. The American Community Survey, or ACS, is done by the US Census. And it is a rolling sample of questions posed to the population in the United States. And as a sample, it means that it is an estimate with a margin of error. And in order to get more certainty, lower margin of error, they will focus on different geographic areas over different time periods. So it's important to understand that the data has that kind of complexion to it. So a 5-year sample means a lot more households are sampled, which adds to the certainty. But because it's over 5 years, it's not a good snapshot of what happens in one particular point in time. Conversely, if it is a 1 year and they have 1 year data sets, then it's really good for giving you information at that point in time, but it isn't necessarily as robust, and therefore the margin of error is bigger. For the most part, the data that I'm going to be using from ACS is the 5-year estimates, which covers 2014 through 2018. That's the latest one. In December, the next 5-year estimate will become available. Right now, they've got a 2019, but it is only of communities that are larger in size. So if you want to know about Boston, you can find that information out now for the 1 year. But for us, that's not available yet. So with that, let me move to the topics that we're going to be discussing. Housing needs data, history of affordable housing, funding, and then finally something about the emergency rental assistance program that the Housing Partnership launched in September. So the key point in this chart is that Watertown's population is growing. It's growing again. And that is part of a regional population growth that's driven by jobs. The greater Boston area has been fortunate in having job growth. And even though right now it is suffering from COVID-related employment loss, the long-term prospect is that with biotech increasingly important, that there will continue to be job growth in the region. So this is a fancy chart that shows age distribution. And the key point here is that we have more of our population coming from the millennial generation than other communities in Massachusetts. The comparison here is between Massachusetts and Watertown. And those ages that correspond to millennials, we are stronger in. And that says something about where things will go in the near future, assuming that we keep this population. And it says something about their housing needs and something about the kind of housing and the kind of numbers we're going to generate. There also is a little bit more in the senior population than is true in Massachusetts as a whole, but that is not as big a point as the millennial generation.
Larry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
This is John Bakian, back on the previous slide.
Yeah.
So the relative underrepresentation of, I guess, partly or mostly that's school age people. I mean, I immediately jumped to the conclusion that this means something about people, families with kids in these ages not choosing to live here. You think that's a fair judgment or conclusion?
Not yet. I don't think that's necessarily true. One of the things that's going on with the millennial generation is they're postponing marrying and having kids. And so that may be what's going on. So I think that there are two different paths for each household that's in this category. It is Watertown is a temporary location for them and they're going to move on to another community, or it may be that they are going to look to settle in Watertown and have a family here, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So individuals with disability. This is important to understand that particular housing need, but also that since disability tends to increase with age, that if you've got a senior population, you have to account for that. And that's certainly going to be true for Watertown.
Excuse me, Larry?
Yes.
Sorry. Could I ask you to run your presentation as an actual slideshow instead of going through it as if you're working on the presentation? Because I'm watching this from my iPad and my eyesight isn't as good as it used to be. So the screen will be bigger for everyone if you run it as slideshow.
Well, that's what I asked at the beginning, whether that was happening. If that's not happening?
It's slideshow is highlighted on our screen, Maria.
Yes, it is.
But
Can you close the sidebar on the left? Is that possible, Larry?
Let me see. Is that better?
No, the sidebar is still there.
Yeah.
Larry, I think if you were to click on the From Current Slide button, the second from the left, I think that's what, try that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you. Oh, we're so smart as a group. It's wonderful. Thanks, Jason.
We're so
Thank
smart
you.
with Jason.
Can't take all the credit.
Watertown, like communities all over the region, is increasingly diverse. And in particular in Watertown, the percentage of Latinx and Asian and foreign-born residents is rising. And that has particular fair housing implications, but fair housing is something that would be an issue whether or not the communities. Tenure mix is looking at whether people are renters or owners, and more than usual in Massachusetts, there is a pretty even split between owners and renters, with it being, pretty much close to 50%. So this is something that I'm sure you've seen either this slide or similar slide many times in the past, because the high housing costs in Greater Boston have really been a focus of attention for years. And I don't need to tell you, anything more about that, other than that whatever we do in Watertown, our issues are going to be driven by what's happening in other communities as much as what we're doing in Watertown. And that has implications for obviously region-wide approaches to increase housing supply and the kind of housing, but also just awareness of where we fit into this ecosystem. So cost of housing in Watertown. These are all pre-COVID numbers. So they're essentially from the middle of 2019. The story is, at least at this time, that the median sales price of single families, condos, gross rent for renters is all going up, and it's pretty expensive. That's true for many communities in Greater Boston. And the next slide is going to try to get at the question of, are we cheap or are we expensive? So kind of historically, Watertown has been less expensive than many of the surrounding communities. But that is no longer as true. And this particular slide documents some of the data on that. So the Greater Boston Association of Realtors puts us at, on the subject of home prices, below places like Cambridge, Belmont, and Arlington that are more in the central core and have been expensive for a long time. And then less expensive still than places that are farther out. Some of the suburban communities that are in Middlesex County or in southern Norfolk County are still, we're still less expensive than they are. And it's, this is the story of people who are feeling the pressure in the inner core and are looking for the next communities, the closest ones, and Watertown is one of those that's closer. And the same story is true for gross rents, that in a place like Cambridge, we are a tier below that in cost, and then farther out, we're more expensive than places like Natick. And obviously, we are in this regional ecosystem as the place that has been cheaper, and therefore that attracts people into Watertown, increasing demand here. And the more demand there is here, the closer we get to the communities that have been more expensive in the past. So this particular slide is both really complicated and important. So I'm going to make the point about what this is, and then I'm going to do several slides that are background and then come back to it. The point of this slide is to answer the question, who in Watertown is most affected by the high housing costs? And in particular is looking at renters and owners, comparing their situations, but also looking at different levels of household income. Implicit in these numbers is going to be fair housing, because it is more true that certain groups are going to be lower income in renters and therefore may have more of a burden from these high housing costs. So I promised you background, and this is the first piece of it. HUD uses these definitions, these ranges of area median income to categorize incomes. And I'm going to break down, for those who are not familiar with it, what all of this means. And I apologize to those for whom this is something you knew 30 years ago. So the A is area, and the area for us is the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy market area. It actually is all of Eastern Massachusetts and a little bit of New Hampshire. The median is the midway point, and income is the income for a household, and it's all of the participants in that household. So at 30% of area median income and below that, you're at the extremely low level, and that's adjusted for household size. So it's different for one-person households or for seven-person households. And then if you get to 100% or over 100%, then it's considered high income. HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, publishes every July or effective every July income limits for the Boston region that are based upon these area median incomes. And this is the basic kind of chart that they put out that says for the particular area median income category, this range, what's the amount of money for a household of different sizes to be in that range. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples to illustrate, what this means, so that it's not just numbers. We're talking about people. Healthcare support, that employment category, which has over 200,000, around 200,000 people in Massachusetts employed in that sector, has an average wage of around $35,000. So if you are one person who is in the healthcare support area, then you are someone who is in the between 30% and 50% AMI category. And so that means you are considered low income. If you are in food prep, that's around 32,000 in wages. And if you are a couple and both of the members of this household are in the food prep business, and let's say they have 2 kids, then this couple with 2 kids are 50% AMI, which puts them at the low income level. So these are the numbers that are used for a wide variety of affordable housing purposes, and where you'll hear government officials, you'll hear activists, et cetera, talking about, or developers talking about 30% of AMI, or using these numbers as different thresholds. This is the chart that they're talking about. The third concept that's important in looking at the housing burden is to figure out how much housing cost you have to have in order for it to be a burden on your household. And for a long time, the consensus has been that if your housing cost is more than 30% of your income, then it's a burden on you. And if it is more than 50%, it's a severe burden on you. And severe burden is where you are in a position where you have to make choices between necessary things. It's not a choice of, I can rent a place and I can have a vacation in Maine. It is a choice between I can rent a place or I have to cut down on how much food I buy at the grocery store. And housing cost in this context means rent and utilities. Or if it's a case of an owner, it's mortgage plus all the things associated with owning a house, operating a house, not kind of capital things.
I'm sorry, Larry, can I ask you a real quick question? Just the definition of the term income, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Is that, are we talking here the gross income like on your 1040 or AGI? Do you know?
It's gross income. Gross income.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this chart. So what it does is it takes these HUD categories, extremely low, very low, low, et cetera, and it breaks out those categories by the number of people in Watertown in that income group, the number of those people who are cost burdened. So it's a 30%, over 30% of their income spent on housing cost. And then it uses a percentage to derive the cost burden. To use the examples that I had before about the healthcare worker and the couple in food prep. If you take that healthcare worker, she's in the ELI category, and it's almost certain that she's suffering from cost burden. You'd have to actually call her up and talk to her and find out what her situation is, but it is almost a slam dunk that she's feeling the pinch. The same thing is true for the food prep couple that we're talking about. again, you know, it's pretty much the same story. 84% of the people in that category in Watertown were renters are feeling that pinch. And the distressing thing about this chart, you can go down, you know, category by category to these buckets, is that so many of the categories have such a high percentage of people who are feeling the effect of housing cost. It's only when you get to the high income level that you say, well, there aren't that many people, isn't as high a percentage of people who are feeling that kind of pinch. I said earlier that fair housing is a part of this. The data we've got, and there was just a presentation on it earlier this week by a consultant for the West Metro Home Consortium, that median income for Black and Latinx households in the region and in Watertown are significantly lower, and they're much more likely to be cost burdened than white or Asian households. So that if you are a Black or Latinx household in Watertown, the chances that you are feeling the pinch are extremely high. So I'm about to transition to topic 2, and that is affordable housing, the history of affordable housing in Watertown. So I just want to make clear what kind of affordable housing we're talking about, because people use the term in 2 different ways. And one way that people try to differentiate the 2 is capital A affordable, capital H housing versus little a, little h affordable housing. And the difference between them basically is that affordable housing can be subsidized housing where there is money that's being used to bring down the cost of housing for people, and there are government restrictions. And then on the other side, there are a lot of places in Watertown and elsewhere that are naturally affordable. The market dictates that this particular house, this particular apartment is at a level that works for the household. And we're going to be talking the rest of tonight about the deed restricted affordable housing. So Watertown started working on affordable housing decades ago when public housing units started to be built here. But the recent history is dominated by inclusionary zoning, because that is a way that the town has since 1989 created significant numbers of new affordable units. And as you know, inclusionary zoning is requiring developers to provide a certain percentage of affordable units in any new developments they do. And the percentage of affordable housing that's required of developers has been going up since 1989 as council has recalibrated as conditions have changed. The current inclusionary requirement in Watertown was enacted in 2016 and applies to projects that are 6 units or more. The units that are provided for the larger projects, so that breakpoint is 20 units or more, that's 15% of the units that they are developing, and 2 income tiers, 65% of AMI and 80% of AMI. So that goes back to the chart that I was discussing earlier. The other thing I want to point out about recent history is that the Watertown Housing Partnership is working on a new housing plan that will assess housing needs and will recommend goals and specific strategies. And the partnership is hopeful that by the end of this fall, it will have a housing plan that can be reviewed within the community. This chart is designed to give you a picture of where the affordable units in Watertown are as far as different types of units. So the largest percentage are public housing, 589 units that have been around mainly for decades. And they particularly are targeted at seniors and families at the lower income levels. Then the inclusionary, which we've discussed before, is the smallest of the three, but it is the one that's growing. It had gone from essentially 0 to 21% in the time since, well, in the last 30 years. And then the other affordable projects are essentially 100% affordable projects that have been done by nonprofit developers using mainly federal state resources.
Larry, can I ask you a
ask
question? Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Sure.
My question is about whether affordable units are in multifamily structures or single or two family structures. And is there data about that?
Right. There are about 15 deed restricted single family homes. Everything else is going to be at larger facilities. This does not cover, by the way, if there's a mobile voucher, because mobile vouchers can move around, not specifically Watertown units. And some of those will be in multifamily and not so much single family, but small families like 2, 3 families will, from time to time have those who have Section 8 vouchers.
You're saying those the number of Section 8 vouchers in use in Watertown is not covered by these.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay.
There are 145 of those, John, just so you know. Larry, I have another question, because you say up here right now there are 1171 total units on the SHI and under construction 72. Is that including the project, for example, at Arsenal Yard and the other projects on Pleasant Street?
Yes.
Because Arsenal Yards alone is 45 units. Then there are 14 that you've just been advertising. So that's 59, and there's still more units. So I'm just kind of confused by that number.
Right. So that includes 101 North Beacon, which is 4, Arsenal Yards, which is 45. I can't remember the 2 others that are smaller ones, but they I believe they add up to 72, and I can share the specifics with you.
I know, because so I assume the ones that are being advertised right now are included in the 1171 number then? That are the lottery is on for those units?
I believe yes.
Okay. And this does or does not include does this include the group? This doesn't include the group homes, I presume.
It does include the group homes, yes.
Does okay, includes the group homes.
Under
and that
465 homes?
Pardon me?
Is that included under the 465 homes, Larry?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No, well, no, not all the group homes are for elderly.
No, that's true.
37%, right?
Excuse me?
Is 37% are elderly? Is that what that slide is saying?
Yes.
Okay.
The group homes aren't necessarily, they're not necessarily elderly, but some of them may be. And so that's why I answered yes too quickly to your question.
Okay, and that also would include the units that are at the Brigham House, for example,
Yes.
for the.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. There's a lot of pieces to kind of look at with all this.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
St. Joseph's Hall is an excellent example of a 100% affordable project. Done 6 years ago, essentially with federal money. And we only wish that we had more in the pipeline.
At that time, those came to about $236,000 a piece.
Unfortunately, it is a lot more now.
No, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunately true that development costs in Greater Boston have been rising significantly over the last, well, since the Great Recession, I'll put it that way. And that has increasingly become a challenge in doing affordable housing. I'm now going to segue to the third topic, which is funding affordable projects. I realize that this is going to be, this can be a semester-long course. I'm not going to act as that professor. I'm not expert enough to do that. But I'm going to have to fly through some of this to try to focus on a few points that I think are important for you as a committee. So one thing is that you start trying to fund an affordable housing project by figuring out what a lender will loan based on operating income. Essentially, what you're trying to do is find out if this were a market project, how much money could you get from the lender to make this a self-sustaining project, or assuming it was a self-sustaining project. And so if the project costs $10 million and you work out the numbers and you say, well, the bank's only going to be willing to loan me $3 million, then you know that the gap is $7 million. And that is what you have to get subsidy for, the $7 million. So the subsidies, unfortunately, don't all come in one place. What you have to do as a developer is to stack or layer multiple programs, federal, state, and local, that can get you to filling that gap. And it's going to be a combination of tax credits, loans, and grants. In some cases, it's going to be loans that get repaid when construction's done. In some cases, it's going to be permanent loans. And there are going to be some loans that you might get deferred or some kind of a great deal on because it is a government loan. But you're going to have to put together all of those things. To provide an example of project funding, I got these numbers from a project in Cambridge. And this is a project, it's a really good one, that is 100% affordable, completed in 2016 by Capstone Communities. And it's 20 apartments with units at different AMI target levels. 2 units at 30%, 6 units at 50%, 12 units at 60% of AMI. And that's kind of typical of projects, that they will divide the units amongst the different income tiers. So what these developers did, what these developers did is that they went to the city first and they got, they said, our gap is going to be, X dollars. And, this is a great project. It's a few blocks from Porter Square in the subway there. What is the city willing to do? And in this case, the city has an affordable housing trust. And that affordable housing trust is funded by CPA dollars plus other sources. It puts what are called linkage fees in there. It puts, other affordable housing program income in there. And so they've got this little bank they're operating, and we're willing to loan $3 million. They got the city to loan money that's coming out of their federal home program. And then from the state, they got loans from different state and federal programs. AHTF is the state Affordable Housing Trust Fund. HOME is the federal program. CATNIP is the state program. And then they put together other things, these solar credits, et cetera. And then at the very top, the 4% LIHTC credits, that's federal and state tax credits, and we'll come back to that. So this is the set of funding sources that they needed to do this project. And you can see, and I've highlighted the AHF, Affordable Housing Trust monies, because that was significantly CPA money, and that's the kind of thing that you could do as a committee on a project. You could put in what turns out to be a pivotal amount of money to help fill the gap, and also to help attract money from DHCD. When DHCD is making its decisions, they're highly competitive, and they like it when there is local money, skin in the game for a project that's being proposed.
Larry,
Larry, sorry, just real quick, can I just interject to say that it's great to see this. I was the architect on this project, believe it or not.
oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I worked very closely with Jason Korb on this from Capstone Communities for like a good 2-3 years on it. It was a great project.
Yes. Yeah.
Jason, do you know how much land this project was put on? I have a couple of questions.
Oh, I could certainly find out. I mean, it was a parcel that is very small. Maybe, I don't know, 2 acres at the most, maybe less.
I'm just asking, trying to find that.
It was a small parking lot off of Harvard Street. It was tiny. Yep.
Yeah, and Larry, do you have any idea what goes into Cambridge's housing trust? Because I believe Cambridge has a mitigation program that when somebody comes in and builds a huge development, they have to pay some mitigation to this trust so people that live in the area are not pushed out. And I do know that Cambridge, they get a ton of money anyway for pilot programs, but I believe they use 80% of their CPA money to go to housing.
Yes,
so quite a bit of housing.
Yes, and that's correct. They have regularly voted 80%. So when I was referring to linkage fees, that's the same thing that you're calling mitigation.
Right.
So for I think it's at least 15 years, Cambridge has had this policy where if a commercial developer of a certain size is coming in, they have to pay a certain amount of money per square foot. And that is to account for the fact that by bringing in jobs, they're creating housing demand in Cambridge, and therefore creating demand for housing and putting pressure on housing prices. So that's something which the Housing Partnership in Watertown has as one of the things it will recommend that the town consider.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, so I just looked up the area. I was way off. It's 10,000 square feet lot size, so it's even tinier than I said.
Wow.
0.25 acres.
10,000 square feet, that's nothing. That's a storefront.
Yeah.
No, 2.5 acres is not 10,000 square feet.
No, 0.25.
Oh, 0.25 acres. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask?
One on Allen's house lot.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, there's house plots in Watertown that are 10,000 square feet.
No, so this is about, this is about a little more than a half acre then, right? Well,
No,
0.25 acres, no. So it's about, you're right, about 10,000 square feet and change.
That's small.
Right.
Can I ask a related question?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think it's related, which is, had this project not been built, not been funded, Larry or Jason, would you care to speculate about what would have been built here otherwise?
Well, it sat vacant for a very long time, so there certainly wasn't much demand for it. I think it was too small to build a lot of uses or other potential uses on it. It probably would have been maybe like 4 to 6 townhouses or something. Can't really imagine what else. Maybe a park, although it's right across the street from another park. Or it would have remained a parking lot in perpetuity.
And do you know whether?
It's a good question, John.
Do you know whether there was any, zoning relief for this project that, perhaps wouldn't have been available to a, some market rate or other commercial use?
God, I can't remember what it was zoned for. It certainly wasn't business because it was not on a. I think it was just.
Jason, I believe that it was
residential.
I believe that it was done as a 40B. So Cambridge is one of those that uses 40B affirmatively, which is it's not required to allow a project to proceed with 40B, but it allows them to get to sort of set aside and simplify any of the zoning issues. They can get relief from all of them automatically. Yeah, we certainly did not go through a whole lot, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
It was a very streamlined process, so it had to have been a 40B.
And it's 10,890 square feet. So I just did a calc on my iPad.
Yeah.
Wow. And may I ask another question of Larry and Jason? So was this done by a small private developer that does this kind of work, does more not for profit? I probably don't have the right terminology.
Yep.
Not for profit.
You're absolutely right. It was sort of a small offshoot company, a guy who used to work for a company called Beacon Communities, who do projects like this on a very large scale. Did a couple of projects using CPA funds in various municipalities around the state. And this guy, Jason, just kind of went off on his own and emulated the same model, but on a much smaller scale. So he learned a ton from his previous employer about cobbling together these types of deals from like 20 different funding sources.
So when we go back to the Rosary Academy, which was 200 and change, so this averaged out to $515,000 per unit.
Right.
Quite a jump in a few years.
I have a couple questions when everyone's done.
Sure. On this slide?
Yes, on this slide. So Jason, did you finish? Because you first chimed in. Did you get everything you wanted to say in?
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
So I have a couple of numbers questions. So one is, I'm curious why the rental income from these is not listed in there, because that's obviously part of the funding, is that there is some contribution for the people that would be housed in these units. And then my second part of my question is, why is the city AHT, the Affordable Housing Trust alone? If it's coming from CPA funds, isn't that more of a grant than a loan? Is that just a typo?
No, this came from Jason, so I'm sure it's not a typo.
Yeah, the other Jason, to be clear, right? The other Jason Corb.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So I don't know the terms of these loans. Sometimes, you can have a loan that is short-term and then they, some of it turns into a grant. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
Back to the first question about income. The income is going to pay the loans. And so that's why it's not being shown here as a funding source.
I see.
And it's a trust, Maria. There's more than one source funding the Cambridge City Trust.
Right.
Oh,
if you
okay.
know what I mean. Okay.
So it's not just CPA monies.
No.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
But we see,
It's all managed through the Affordable Housing Trust.
pardon me, Alan?
It's all managed and overseen by the Affordable Housing Trust, which
Correct.
we have in Watertown. Is that correct? We don't have such an entity right now, do we?
No,
We could fund an entity like that, but right now we do not have a legal entity as an Affordable Housing Trust in Watertown.
That's correct. So
Okay.
the partnerships recommendations in the housing plan will be to consider forming an affordable housing trust in Watertown.
Very good.
So the other thing I would note about this particular project is 20 apartments. That pretty much is as small as DHCD will go in funding projects. I happen to have done a study of about 5 years worth of funding decisions by DHCD. And I could only find 2 projects that were less than 20 units, and both of them were very specialized. My memory, one of them was a veterans project, maybe both of them were, and at least one of them was in Western Massachusetts. And the reason for that is that they want to keep the per unit development cost down. And when you get into small projects, those costs per unit are pretty high. And they also, what they're trying to do is to create the phrase bang for your buck. They like larger projects. That doesn't mean, they also don't do 200 unit projects as new developments, but something in the 20 to 30 to 40 range would be considered a project that they would be interested in, for sure. And that's a relevant point when you're thinking about what are the kinds of things that will, that the CPA money could leverage federal and state resources. That's the kind of project size that they'd be interested in. So I think that I have a frozen screen here. I apologize for that.
Larry, while you're sorting that out, what was you said 20 to 30,000 square foot project size?
No, units.
Units.
Homes, apartments, yeah.
Okay, and I know Elodia wanted everyone to stay unmuted, but there's some feedback. And for the sake of those that may be watching this as a recording, I would just suggest that those that are not needing to speak mute themselves, because I'm hearing some feedback and it's difficult for me to hear all of Larry's comments. That's all, just a thought.
Great, thank you. So I mentioned tax credits. There are federal low-income tax credits. There are also state ones, and they are designed to be an incentive for private investors to provide cash to the project as equity. Then there are a whole bunch of federal and state subsidy programs, and I'm not going to go through these. I'm just going to identify that they're here. You can go back and get more information about them. They're all a little bit different. And then there are Watertown subsidy sources. Now, 2 of them are really federal sources, but there's some measure of local control over at least some money. So I want to explain that. And then obviously there's CPA money, which is something that Watertown controls. So Watertown belongs to the West Metro Home Consortium in communities that are working together to get federal, what are called home program dollars to use for affordable housing. And there's some monies that each of the municipalities get every year to use for eligible uses. And there's the money that's pooled where communities can apply within the 13 and get the money to do a particular project. So that's potentially something that can be used for future affordable projects in Watertown, in addition to the fact that there's some program income from past projects that's essentially sitting in a bank account. And then CDBG, Community Development Block Grants, we are not entitled to that money. There's some communities that are. We have to compete with other communities that are also non-entitlement, and DHCD decides amongst the communities when there's a specific project. So they will look at the different applications. They'll decide which one that they want to give some money to. And in addition, we have some past money program income from past awards. So we're in the home stretch here, last slide. And this is hot off the presses. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program was created by the Housing Partnership. It launched on September 3rd. Today was the last day. And it's designed to provide up to 3 months of assistance to households in Watertown where they have reduced income, and they're income eligible. Again, that magic 80% AMI pops up again. So far, we have about 50 applicants. They are split so that about half of them are 2-bedroom, and then the remainder are pretty evenly split between 1 and 3-bedroom. About half of them have children in their household, and about half are communities of color. So that gives you a picture of where we are. We'll know more in the coming days about how that shakes out, and the partnership will have to make some decisions about whether it is interested in pursuing something like this for the future. So I know we've taken a lot of time. I'm happy to answer any remaining questions. I know you have other things on your agenda.
Larry, if I could ask a question, those are applicants, those are not yet vetted applications, am I correct?
I'd say half right. So there's vetting that's done during the process by Metro West Collaborative, but they haven't necessarily said all 50 of them check all the boxes.
Right.
And in some cases, people who do check all the boxes wind up dropping out for whatever reason. So right. The number will likely go down, but we don't know by how much.
Okay, and I have one more question in relation to the ACS study, because when I look at the stats for Watertown now, the income is for that same period, 2014 to 2018, median household income is listed at $97,929. So that's half above, half below, right? But the other stat, and I don't know how to figure it out, is that then they talk about persons in poverty, and that's at 7.9%, which is lower than Boston. And Boston's income is lower than Watertown. So I'm trying to shape all this of where Watertown is going in a way. And then I'm trying to grapple with all those numbers that you showed us earlier. I don't know if you can add anything to that.
I think we are, we're a community that has different points within it. And there are parts of Watertown that are poor, and obviously there are parts that are affluent. That's both a geographic thing and just mixed in everywhere. And so you know, it's not surprising to me that we could have a median income that looks that high, but yet, you know, have pockets of, you know, significant.
I have a couple of questions,
Yeah.
if I may. And first, I guess just a couple of observations. Going back to the, I forget which slide it was, but it showed the number and percent of low income, whether extremely low income or just low income households who are housing burdened in Watertown. And doing some quick and hopefully not too sloppy math, it seemed like between renters and owners, there are something like 2,400 households in Watertown that are low income and housing burdened, you know, who are being required to spend more than 30% of their income on housing and such. And so just comparing that number to the 50 applicants here, and I know that just because someone is low income housing burden doesn't necessarily mean that they you know, would qualify for emergency rental assistance, or but it sort of suggests that they could use some rental assistance, or perhaps if they're owners, I guess it would be mortgage assistance or something like that. So I just contrasting those numbers and then thinking about looking at those cost figures for developing affordable housing. And it seems pretty clear that the more expensive a community gets, the greater the pressure to address affordable, maybe the greater the affordable housing gap, if you will, and the more pressure to address it through greater housing production. That, you know, the one or two family, maybe Section 8, whatever, is not going to meet the need as the community gets more expensive. And so that would sort of tend to, you know, lead to larger projects, more concentrated projects. So I just, you know, I don't know if you have any comment about this, about the strategy of, you know, on the one hand, going for greater production and therefore larger projects and more, you know, concentration within larger projects, as compared to the, you know, if there are 2,400 households who are housing burdened, they're probably spread over, you know, many structures, and so just comparing the strategies of trying to assist with housing affordability among those many households, as compared to, and I know they're not necessarily in competition, but as compared to the production of you know, 20, 30, 40 unit developments. Any comment or thoughts about that?
Yeah. So the first point was about the emergency rental assistance, and you know, one of the things that has been seen in a number of communities that have launched similar programs since March is that the number of applicants is lower than many projected. And there hasn't been any real explanation yet. No one really has been able to reconcile that, because when you do the math on a you know, at the APC level, the numbers of people who should be applying would be much greater. And you know, one of the easy possible explanations is that the outreach isn't good enough. That there are a lot of people who would be eligible who don't know about it. And that's certainly one of the things that, you know, that all of these communities are looking at if they are considering second rounds of rental assistance. I know that your larger point was about using rental assistance as an ongoing strategy and not merely, you know, right now. So, I think that the difference between the two is that if you have a rental assistance program, you are essentially committing the community to closing the gap for a large number of households for a long period of time, and that is a commitment that has to be carefully considered whether that's what you're willing to do. To be able to say that we're going to support 100 families, 200 families, 300 families with rental assistance for the time that they're in the community. I think that with the creation of affordable units that are deed restricted, either through inclusionary zoning or through 100% affordable projects like Port Landing, what you're doing is you're leveraging your local resources so that others are paying a large portion of what you're getting. So in the inclusionary example, the private developers are basically providing or closing that gap for you. And they are, presumably either taking less profit or they're cross-subsidizing within the project in order to be able to do that. And then with the 100% affordable, when you're applying to DHCD, most of those resources are not from Watertown. They're from federal and state. And so you're leveraging your local resource to get someone else to help you with the loans, the grants, et cetera. So I think those are some of the factors you consider when you're comparing doing a rental assistance program versus the creation of new affordable units.
Well, and if I could just comment, and I don't mean this to be as value laden as I know it's going to sound, in terms of getting those out of Watertown resources or out of the community, whatever community is, the community is also having more relatively large or moderately large multifamily buildings being built in the community, and that's a trade-off, and maybe it's a good trade-off, but I just want to mention that it is a trade-off.
Yeah, well, I understand that, and I think what you also have to put in the balance is that there are arguments for providing that kind of zoning and encouraging that kind of development for reasons other than creating affordable housing. That you want to reposition properties that have been formerly industrial into something else, that you want to attract employers through having the kind of housing that will support their employees, that you want to bring in, and it seems like we've been fairly successful at it, bring a younger population into Watertown. So all of those are reasons why it's not just about affordable housing. And you're right that anytime you have a larger development, there are costs to that, and that has to be weighed in as well.
Thanks.
Larry, I have a question about the housing cost burden slide.
Yeah.
So is that percentage of households that are cost burdened, that's based on their income, not taking into consideration the actual housing costs? Am I assuming that?
No, it is that they are spending more than 30% of their income on housing.
Okay, so there's the data on how much they're spending on housing.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Elodie,
I think this has been terrific.
Elodie, are you talking? We can't hear you.
Oh, no, I'm going to unmute for a second.
Okay.
I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are.
Now you are.
Okay, thank you. I guess one of the things is, Larry, is, you know, Watertown has been built and rebuilt again. So one of the questions that I have is, A, where do you find that 10,000? I can think of some 5,000 or 6,000 lots around, but I don't know where we have a 10,000 to do something like Jason worked on. It's pretty unusual. And then I think there are different versions of low income, because it's a difference between somebody who's older and earning that income, or a younger person who's just starting out earning income but has more opportunity to increase wages. Because if you are in a unit at one of the big complexes in town with the lotteries going on, you can go up to 140% of area median income. So how do you ever meet the need for the person that may never be able to climb up, you know, the salary chain? You know, there's a difference between somebody coming out of college and doing a job that may be paying 40 or 50, or somebody who may never get beyond that point. And I'm not saying this very well. I'm just trying to think this through, because I believe in the, Alan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, with the housing authority, I believe you can stay there till you hit 100% of area median income. I know for the vouchers, they can go up to 100% of area median income.
Yeah, we have, well, first of all, public housing, public and low income housing, our average income, family income, is $15,000 a year. I think you've talked to Michael Lara about that.
Right.
And the average subsidy from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to our residents is less than $10 a day.
Right.
It's a pretty good bang for the buck, when at one time the governor was housing people in distress in motels and hotels for $3,000 a month. So
right.
It's a whole different ball game. Low income and elderly housing. Then the next step up would be that affordable housing that you're talking about now. Yeah, we get a whole different, you know, group of people. We have people that make $5,000 a year. We might have a family that might make $40,000 a year, a family of four, two people working at Target and the kids working or whatever. But the average family income is $15,000 a year.
Right. So,
not a lot of
yes,
money.
You're right, I know.
30% of their adjusted gross income for rent. So they were able to deduct their medical expenses and a couple of other legal things. And then it's basically, so if you're making $15,000 a year, you're basically paying about $5,000 a year for rent. And then we can subsidize from DHCD for the balance.
Right.
We've been level funded for years, and you know what that means. Nothing's
Yep.
going down on the other end.
Oh.
No costs that are going down.
Yeah.
Right. Is there any place, Larry, that you know of that might be similar to Watertown? Because, I mean, Cambridge is a whole different breed of cat. Newton is. Waltham is. They all, you know, Waltham has tons of land. Very aggressive about buying up its land to protect the community so they can have control over it. But they also have a lot of it, and they have a huge tax base given 128 Beltline. Just trying to see where we fit. That's what I'm always trying to learn from a comparable community. So I don't know if you have any ideas about that.
Well, you know, I think if you're focused on where there are opportunities, development opportunities, a lot of the communities around us, if you look at the entire community, you would say we're different. But if you look at parts of the community, you would say, you know, there's some similarities. You know, so, you know, there are parts of Cambridge that are near the Belmont border, near Alewife, where that kind of industrial land is very similar to the Pleasant Street corridor. Now, obviously, a place like Cambridge and a place like Newton have advantages over Watertown as far as resources go. They get federal resources that we don't get. They've had affordable housing trusts that are able to produce affordable housing. But I think you can pick. You can cherry pick ideas from different communities that would work in Watertown, even if you can't find a place that you can say, oh, that's just like Watertown.
Right. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Larry? Any concerns? Larry, if not, I just really want to thank you. You've given us a lot to chew on, that's for sure. I very much appreciate how quickly you put this together, and thank you. I mean, it's really informative. It's hurting my head right now. Mark is clapping, so we'll all clap. But really, thank you very, very much. It's very much appreciated, because you've only been here since July, and it's basically maybe about, what, 2 months, right? So you hit the ground running. So thank you.
Yeah,
Terrific.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'll hang on for a while to hear the parts, at least part of your agenda.
Sure. Okay, well, now I have the minutes. Were there any changes to the minutes that you all received? I didn't see anything coming back to Lene for changes.
There was just a one-word change.
Okay.
And I did send that out to the committee.
Okay, then did I miss that? Can you just tell me what the word was, Lene? I missed it then.
Look, I have to look for this now. It's on page 2, where it says in the essence of time, changing essence to interest.
Oh, okay, I saw that too. I highlighted that. And then my only comment was on page 3, number 4, the only administrative expenses paid were paid out of the 50-20 budget. New cycle, yes, in the last goal, and the only administrative expenses paid for fiscal year 21 are the coordinator salaries. It's presently, to date, that have been paid, and we're paying, the dues in your salary. Just seemed a little awkward to me. It sounds like we're in the present tense right now. That's just me. Does anybody see what I'm talking about, or are we all too tired?
So you're saying that it should be in the present tense as opposed to paid,
right? Because we've just started the new year. We're not going. there are other things that will be happening, which we're going to talk about as well. Okay.
I suppose you could insert to be paid.
Right. Or are presently paid from, because there'll be other things coming down the pike.
Like a graphic designer.
Yes. Okay. Then if everybody's okay with that, may I have a motion on the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from August 31st. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Thank you, Jason. I'm sorry. And Mark, were you doing a second? Did I see you? I can't hear you.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, I need a roll call, of course, Lene, please. Thank you.
Let me just type this in here.
Great.
Okay. And John Bakian.
Yes.
Okay. Jason Cohen.
Yes.
Bob DeRico.
Yes.
Dennis Duff.
Yes.
Alan Gallagher.
Yes.
Mark Kreskevich.
Yes.
Maria Rose.
Yes, but I wasn't there, so I don't.
Oh, you weren't. Okay, so just, sorry, you're absent. So I'll leave you out. Okay, and then Susan Steele.
Yes.
Elodia Thomas.
Yes.
Okay. They're all set.
Thank you. Great. Our next thing on our agenda is the graphic design scope of work and budget submitted by Marcia Ciro. I believe Susan had sent me a resume for one person that she knew, but this person looked very high powered and in a big job. And then Jason had spoken to somebody, I believe, Jason, at your company, but
yeah,
we never got anything to talk to him.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm going to decline any further pursuit of that for a number of reasons. I think maybe just best to leave that aside. So, yeah.
Okay, and I know that several people had asked if I would go and speak with Marcia. So I did talk to her a little bit, and then I asked Lene to reach out and then further discussion along. And let me just tell you why I thought this was important. There's several reasons. Marcia knows Watertown. She certainly knows the CPA. We know the quality of her work. She's 5 minutes away, so that if we would need to meet with her to sort something out, she's very available. This is what she does all the time. She's just finished a major new rebranding campaign for the floating hospital, the Children's Floating Hospital, as part of Tufts. And she's also a very good writer. So she's a person that could look at what we're doing kind of with another pair of eyes of, does it make sense to her, in the sense of knowing about everything. So Lene, maybe you'd like to share your conversation with her in the exchange and the proposal that she came up with.
Or so I sent that proposal out to everyone. And she proposed, based on what I anticipated, that our plan would be roughly 40 to 50 pages, excluding the appendices, which, she doesn't really have to do any work on. And then about a 25-page application manual, and then possibly online application forms. So she submitted a proposal to do all the design and layout for those materials. And this project would include, the photos, illustrations, charts, tables, graphs, sidebars. And she proposed $60 an hour, and she anticipated 20 hours of work, so at a cost of $1,200. And then that would, include a draft of including all those items and components. And then, if we had subsequent changes, if they were, pretty lengthy or pretty involved, then she would, anticipate additional expenses for that. But I mean, I wouldn't imagine that would get you to more than $1,500 total, if it even would go that high. So I thought this was a very reasonable proposal. Yes.
I did as well. Maria?
Well, I mean, that's a bargain. I have consultants that charge me, there might be 3 or 4 team members and it cost me $1,000 for a meeting. So I would say go for it. And I would say allow a cushion to, even more than 1,500,
right.
Maybe 2,000, I don't know, just in case. But it seems like very, very reasonable pricing.
Yeah.
I hope she didn't underestimate too much.
I would agree.
Jason? Okay.
Yeah, piggybacking on that, I almost too reasonable. I mean, 20 hours goes by really quickly, I think, when you're doing that sort of work. So I agree with Maria. I mean, I would not, it's always best to have sort of cost control and I think, maybe be a little conservative about the amount of time this might take. I get that if there's a second round of revisions, that would be extra, which would be entirely expected. And I know it's unusual to approve an amount higher than what a proposal is, but I'd rather sort of have that buffer and not have to, nickel and dime something as we go along. I'd be in favor of authorizing 1,500 or more, just to make sure that she feels, empowered to do the work properly.
Right.
That's my thought.
I'd like to suggest $2,000 because We didn't get billed out. There's quite a bit of money still left from the Goldston contract that was unfulfilled.
I'm not sure if we can carry that over. Tom's with us. Maybe you could answer that question, Tom. And could you also speak to this process? Could we approve initially like 1,500, or just would you kind of walk us through this? This is the first time you've been here that you could share this with us.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
As you were speaking, my eyebrows were raising, but when I heard it was only 20 hours at $60, my eyebrows went way down. My concern was it had nothing to do with the individual or whatever, but the concern I had was this going to have to be going out to something that was going to have to go out to bid, or at least attempt to get 3 quotes. But something under $5,000 is you can make a smart business decision, and for all the reasons why you just spoke to, that's fine. As far as what you want to lot for price, and that's up to you. But to your point about the contract that was done in last year, that money, if you had continued services with the company, I had put in as I carried over that PO, but since I think you've severed your relationship with that company, that money is actually going to drop to the bottom line. You don't have that money available for this calendar year.
Right. That money now goes back into that the other fund. Am I correct, Tom?
Yeah, it won't.
The undesignated fund.
Yeah, but it doesn't close because I carried it over. Not knowing that you severed the relationship. Well, you didn't do it until after July 1st anyways.
Right.
It doesn't drop to the bottom line, if you will, the undesignated fund balance that you're talking about, Elodia. It doesn't do that until next June 30th.
Till June 30th, because that's another question we have for you. But okay, so that money is somewhere in our budget still, but this would be a new appropriation then going forward. Am I correct? From our new admin fund budget.
Right, because your new admin budget for fiscal year 21 is, and I'm looking at the
roughly 130.
It's exactly 130.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions of Tom? And Tom, may I ask you, is it appropriate for us to say that we would allocate 2,000 and just hold that in our mind, and then we could work with Marcia? She's scoped it out as this, so that if it comes in a little higher, we know that we've agreed to that amount, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like with Lene, what Lene spoke to, it's $60 an hour is really what the thing that you're saying, and 2,000 divided by the 60 is you're buying 33 hours, 33.33 hours. So the $60 an hour for an amount not to exceed $2,000 at this time, with the understanding that if you need more, you'd come back to Lene would come back to the committee and ask you to vote even more. So I think the $2,000 at $60 an hour and an amount not to exceed 2,000 is a fair vote.
Great. Wonderful. I believe that we need to take a vote on that.
Yeah.
Dennis?
Can I make a motion, please?
Yes, please.
Please.
Even though Sarah and I have crossed swords a few times, I was very impressed with her work for our logo, which did she do that for free?
Yes, she did.
And she donated her time to us and the community. But I'm more impressed with her community activity and her caring about making Watertown a better place to live and work. So therefore, I would like to make a motion that we hire Ms. Sarah at $60 an hour and up to $2,000 for her work in design and layout of materials for public rollout of programs. Is that all I need?
Sounds pretty good to me, Dennis. It may have a second.
Second.
I couldn't really hear the motion.
Pardon me?
I couldn't really hear the motion.
Okay, Lene, can you read the motion back? Because Dennis's voice is kind of deep and I believe he's on the phone.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Dennis moves to hire Ms. Zero at $60 per hour, not to exceed a total of $2,000 for design services on the CPA plan.
Right, with the idea that if we need more, you will come back to the committee, Lene.
Okay.
Can we add that in? Because I think that's what Tom had said.
Well, that you can always do.
Okay, I know that, John, but I mean, Tom had just kind of closed the loop to come back and speak with the committee. Is that comfortable? You want to read it back one more time?
Did you get that, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
John, fine. Okay. All right. So I have Genesis made the motion. I need a second.
Maria
please.
seconded.
Maria, sorry, Maria. And then would you do a roll call, please, Lene?
Well, graphic designer. Okay. John Bakian.
Yes.
Jason Cohen.
Yes.
Bob DeRico.
Yes.
Dennis Duff.
Yes.
Alan Gallagher.
Yes.
Mark Kreskevich.
Yes.
Maria Rose.
Yes.
Susan Steele.
Yes.
Elodia Thomas.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving right along. Now with regard to the update of our plan, the application manual, housing, open space and recreation. I know that Lene, you had a meeting with, I believe, Susan, Jason, and John. So thought I'd let you talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So the way we've been working on this is that there are pretty much 5 active areas of revision. One is the application manual, and Jason, Susan, and John are working with me on that packet. Jason basically took the initiative in establishing a Dropbox and began editing the application manual with track changes, and John has added comments and edits as well. Susan and I have been looking at examples of how other CPA programs present their application guidelines and instructions in the forms. And based on one of those examples, I reorganized the evaluation matrix found in the Goldson draft. So we did have a meeting. Susan, Jason, and I had a meeting. And what we were looking at is, what do we think needs to happen conceptually with that packet? And we decided that we were going to present things in a little cleaner manner. So put the application timeline in a table, come up with a graphic concept for application steps. And Susan and I are working on a list of decision guidelines. And that's something that's not currently found in the document. And there also are no goals or information in the application manual for the specific CPA categories. So that's something else that we're working on. And so the next step for me will be putting together some of these materials into a clean draft form. And this is just conceptual, the text may need to be edited or revised, but we're just trying to put together an entire concept for that application packet so that we can have something to review amongst ourselves and then work on revising the text if need be, and then have something for the committee to review.
I actually have a question because I hadn't thought about it when we were talking, and that is, how soon, Lene, do you think that we might want to involve Marcia Ciro in taking a look at some of our efforts and beginning to put them into diagrams and charts and so on and so forth?
Well, I think, once we have the concept agreed upon. And I think the full committee, you know, would need to agree upon that, and the revised text in place, then I think at that point we would involve Marcia.
Okay.
It behooves us to have as much material together as clearly as possible, Susan, before we hand it off to Marcia. Because otherwise we're playing the revision game again and again and again, and we don't want to get into that. We want to give her as clean a copy that everybody in the committee has looked at, been able to say yes, no. And while there may be a tweak here or two, and certainly after our public hearing, there may be a tweak, but we want to be as complete as possible. Before we go on to the next thing, Tom, I didn't know you were coming tonight. I didn't know if you'd like me to move you up because you probably had a long day. Would you like to go before I speak about the rest of the plan, because the financials?
Sure.
Okay, would everybody okay with me just adjusting the schedule? Thank you. Okay, Tom.
So I think Lene passed out the spreadsheet that or sent to the committee.
I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just quickly, the above the solid line is basically the cash balance as well as the income and expenses for the last 3 full fiscal years. As a reminder, our fiscal year ends on June 30th of each year. The last column is year to date for 2021, but I'll concentrate more on the column of fiscal year 20. The CPA fund is finished with a balance just slightly more than $7 million. Thank you. So the $7 million is can be seen right at the ending cash balance as of June 30th. And that's how much cash is on hand as of June 30th. The only expenditures you had last year was the $20,000 for personnel and $27,000 for purchase of services. And the revenue above that is the various different revenue categories that you came in and you brought in about almost $2.7 million. Below the solid line is—
Tom, may I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Does that serve, is the, what do you call it? Is the coalition's fee included in that?
Yeah, that would be the coalition for, the first coalition fee was paid last year. It's in the $27,200.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So that's essentially Goldson and the coalition.
That's right.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that one, and then in the personnel is Lene's salary plus
the note takers.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year you had some note takers.
Right. Thank you, Tom.
And then below the budget is just the below the solid line is more the budget information. It's how we came up with the reserves and what we put as an estimated revenue. The estimated revenue is what is, you know, what drives the reserve amount that we put aside for the 10% in the area. And then of course the 5% administrative budget was in 20 was the first time that you had that. And then in 20 we projected, 21, which is in the yellow, we projected $2.6 million. We slightly went up on the CPA surcharge of, by another 100,000 from the previous year. And then the state revenue at the time we were doing this, don't forget I was doing this in June. And in the midst of COVID, I didn't know exactly how that was gonna, the fees across the board in government right now, COVID-19 is hitting it hard. So, we just did probably a best estimate. And as you probably know from me, I'm very conservative when it comes to estimating, especially revenue. So that's how we came up with the 2.6. I did that in conjunction with the town assessor, Mr. Smith. And so then 10% for the 2.6 is the 260 each year. For each of the 3 areas.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, Tom, and I'm going to fumble through them because I'm not a finance person like you. But first of all, these still say estimated revenue, and now we know the exact revenue. And my question is why you when you estimated the 1.5, when we look below the line, like I'm looking at fiscal year, for example, 2018, we ended up with the 1,899,397 and change. So shouldn't each of the specific reserves gotten 189,939.73, whatever exactly? Do you know what I mean? Like, I understand you make the estimate, but then when you finally have the year-end figure, wouldn't you put some money, some extra money that we had back towards those 3 specific reserves? I
understand your question.
Okay.
As far as I know, and I can check into it, that's not how it works, because I also have to report to the Department of Revenue. If you can go to, was the second page that I sent provided? Yeah.
Yes.
If you go down a little bit on this one here, if you note, I added a couple more rows down on the bottom underneath the line. And if you see that, and you see the bottom 2 rows and they're exact same amounts, and that's just
correct.
My double checking it. Just so you know, that's actually the undesignated fund balance at the end of each year, or like the 70% or 65%, if you will. So even though we estimated it, using 18 as an example, we estimated $1,050,000, 10% of 150 areas. That 1,050 is actually 1,449,000 because the revenue of it was actually 1,899, which 1,899 minus the 1,050 is actually, that's how you get the $449,000 that went in here. So the cumulative reserve, or the actual cumulative reserve, is your running total of what is actually in the extra money, if you will. So we don't increase the 10%, and I'll check with the Department of Revenue, but my understanding is you don't increase it from the budget, but you keep the money in the extra, so that when you start doing projects and you want to do something more than 10%, you're going to dip into the undesignated, which is now at the end of fiscal year 20, is $5,058,000. And by the way, that $5,058,000, when you add up the 10% of the 150, the 236, and the 248 for each one of those 3 areas, you have another $1.9 million, or $634,879 in each of the 3 areas. So you got a significant amount of money now. You're up to the $7 million.
So it's just based on your understanding of the accounting, the estimates are fixed, and then the remainder, or the actual ending cash balance minus those estimates, goes into the reserve. And then that money is, once we start approving projects and dispersing funds for projects, that reserve is available to go into any of the categories.
Any of the other 3 categories.
Right. The only thing I think we want to be careful about calling this the reserve versus the undesignated, because some communities do set aside a specific amount that they always want to keep in reserve. We have chosen not to do that yet. We are simply keeping it in the undesignated fund. For my benefit in the future, Tom, I wonder if we could have a line in there somehow that shows us at the end of the year what we ended up with still in the kitty for the admin fund that is now going into the undesignated fund at the end of the year. Is that a possibility?
Well, it's in there because when you don't spend your $124,000 budget,
right,
you only spent 47, and then I carried over the 37,150. That was the open purchase order.
Right.
The net difference is actually in that 5058. In fact, the 5058, if it wasn't for the carryover, you would have had 5095.
Right. No, I'm just, because somebody had asked me a question about this, and I understood their question because they said, well, wait a second, if you came out with the 1899, I'm just using that as an example, how come each of the special reserves did not get that 189 and change? Now, we all know that we can appropriate any extras we want out of that undesignated fund, but I just want us to be as transparent as possible with the public of how this is done, so that, they may come back to you and say, Tom, you're being too conservative, but, I'm kind of conservative myself. I just want to understand that. And I did look on the site for the coalition. They have an article and a forum about this, which I found quite confusing still, but maybe we can talk about that sometime. But thank you. Does anybody have any questions of Tom or any concerns?
One comment before you anybody else asks me a question.
Sure.
One thing about doing it and staying with the budget that was estimated and then not increasing it. And one, I don't think the OR lets you do that. And one of the reasons why is I think it puts in some it creates some flexibility with the other 70%, if you will, as that builds up. If you do better than what is estimated revenue, which we have done in each and every year. Yes. Since it gives greater flexibility with the 70%. It gives you more to do. You can move the money around a little bit better.
Right. Thank you, Tom. Did somebody have their hand up?
Yeah, I have a question.
Hey, John.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So but if we wanted to, could we designate from that undesignated reserve without having projects in mind, but could we designate a certain percent to go to whether to each of the category areas or to any particular category area? Could we do that?
That I don't know. I'll find out for you. In other words, what you're saying is, could we now at the end of June take some of that $5 million and disperse it or increase some of the reserve in some of the other areas? I think that's what you're asking me.
I wouldn't go to a lot of bother to find out, because I don't know that anybody's proposing that at this point. So, but if it's an easy thing to find out, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd just like to say thanks to Tom for all his help.
Yep.
Amen.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Anybody? Maria, did you have a question?
Well, no, I just want to say thank you too, but I also maybe to explain how municipal budgets work. You always set a budget that's lower than what you think you might have in municipal government. So I think that's why it's an excellent question you asked, Claudia, and I was curious of Tom's answer, but I think that it's just common practice that you're really not 100% sure all that money is going to come in. So you always set a budget lower. Is that accurate way to describe it, Tom?
That's how we've always done it here in Watertown since I've been here, whether it's a CPA fund or even our general fund. We're going to be conservative in our revenues, and hopefully we get more than what we expect so that we can build the bottom line.
No, I think I have no problem with that, Tom. I run my own household budget the same way. It was more the question that I got, and the term that was used, well, can't you top off those 3 categories at the end of the year if you come in over? And I didn't know the answer. And there is an article on the coalition website, which is called CPA Finances Demystified, but I'm still mystified. So I'm glad you're here tonight to ask you these questions. And I'll shoot this article to you. I don't know if you've seen it, but it definitely was a little confusing for me, but I had a long day, so I hadn't read it as well as I should have, but
yeah, send it to me and I'll take a look at it.
Sure, great, Tom, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Jason.
I know we only have 10 minutes left, but I just want to ask this question about the CPA surcharge, and to confirm my understanding that despite the ravages of COVID-19, I'm guessing there's a fair amount of cost certainty as it pertains to the surcharge, because assessments, if they were to ever go down, would take a very long time to catch up economically, right? As a trend, like it's not like, I mean, unless people stop paying their property taxes, then we can expect a certain amount of certainty on the CPA surcharge part of the revenue, right? Is that accurate?
Yes, you can. There is certainty, because even if the value goes down, you got to remember the real estate taxes is there's a few different variables. It isn't just value of the homes; it's also then the tax rate. So it's either when you want to get to $10, it's either it could be 2 times 5 or 5 times 2. So value versus rate will dictate. Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is there is certainty. The only thing would be is if our collection rate starts being reduced, and our collection rate, and I'm knocking on wood as I say that, in the town of Watertown has been in the high 97, 98%. If not higher, for a very consistent number of years. Our taxpayers, and we're thankful for them, pay their taxes, and they pay them on time. Whether we see that with the COVID-19 and able to continue that remains to be seen.
Gotcha. Thank you.
We have a lot of unknowns. Any other questions for Tom? Bob, did you have a question?
I don't, no.
Okay, no, I just saw you flash a little bit. Okay, well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Tom. I'll send that article to you, and maybe you and Lene and I can talk about it a little bit at some point, just to kind of walk through so we all understand the same things. That would be great.
All right. Good night,
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks,
I apologize, Tom. If I'd known you were coming, I would have bumped you up earlier right after Larry, so he would have, you would have both known how to be here for so long. Okay,
no
thank
problem.
you.
I was doing some reading of other stuff in my office while I was half paying attention with the affordable housing. Very interesting.
Okay, yeah, it was. Okay, so just to continue then, let me jump back to where we are. As I said, that we had a kind of little general info discussion, which resulted in Larry doing this fantastic job for us of educating us all a little bit about the affordable housing issue. We also had another porch meeting with Leo and Patrick Fairbairn. Mark Oskevich was there, Lene, myself. I think I'm missing one person again. Am I missing anybody? Bobby. Yep. Yeah. And we all kind of did the same thing, just kicking around things about the plan and how we would reconstruct it. And one of the key things we came up with is that the open space and recreation is so tied together in Watertown because we have so little space. So Leo and Patrick, and then they're consulting with Maria, are kind of doing a beginning reconstruction of that section. And then we can kind of do the same thing we're shaping. Mark has been doing that with the housing section. We haven't gotten to Susan yet. I believe Lene and Susan are going to talk about the historical portion a little bit, because everybody felt that those little one-page fact sheets were too hard to read, too crazy. Mark had recently sent me his another reworking of housing, and now he's got some additional information from Larry. But it's so much cleaner. He put in graphs. It's so easy to read. It's much more understandable. So that's what we're shooting for. I am working on the introduction and the kind of basic stuff right now. And I think we're on a good plan. So everybody's pitching in, which is great. It's led to some very kind of interesting discussions. We're not making any decisions when we're on the porch or anything like that, just so you all know. We invite people, and if they can make it, they make it. But that's basically the update right now. And I don't know if anyone has any questions. No questions? The other thing that came out of our little porch sitting around the open space issue is, as you know, way back before COVID, Mark and a couple of other folks had asked about doing some kind of just walking around of Watertown of some special places that the Concom and Bob could show in terms of recreation and open space. So Bob came up with this great idea, I thought, of 3 sites. Something old, which was the Commander's Mansion, one of his favorite parks, which was Arsenal Park, which of course the Concom, excuse me, does have custody of, and then Walker Pond, where I am right now, as you all know. We were just so excited about this idea because it's nice weather, it's not boiling hot, and we thought, well, we could all go out for a walk and keep properly social distance to do our kind of info reconnaissance walk. And we thought about maybe doing it this weekend or the following weekend, the first weekend in October. Didn't know if anybody had any interest in doing that. It's not mandatory, but we just thought it was a fun way to get together because we'll all be in disguise and we'll all be properly masked, but it was just a way to look at 3 different sites in town just to kind of be acquainted in a different way because you can't quite do that with housing. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a
Bob likes my park so much.
Dennis, we're having such a hard time hearing you. You're so muffled. Could you speak up a little louder?
Yes, I said I think it's a great idea. I look forward to going, and I'm so pleased that Bob likes my park so much.
That's true. Okay. So I didn't know, Maria, shoot.
Well, it just reminds me that before COVID, we had discussed back in the fall of doing these 3 different educational tours for the 3/4 areas of our funding. And then that fell to the wayside. So this is a good substitute. So I think it's great. Of course, I wanted to get you guys into the wetland replication area. That is really cool, but maybe I'll just show you a teaser photo of a monarch butterfly that was being eaten by what are those bugs called?
Praying mantis.
Praying mantis.
Got nothing on us. I had a hawk yesterday as I drove in my driveway at my neighbor's house, right on the edge of the sidewalk, nailed the squirrel and was tearing it up. Amazing, big hawk, huge.
Wow.
I mean, it was mind-blowing. I did have my stupid cell phone with me to take a photo. Anybody else's ideas? Would you have a preference for a date? Because then we could just say we'll meet at this time at the mansion. Bobby, did you think that was the first place to start?
Exactly, yes.
So we could go for the mansion, walk over to the park, and then we could travel over to Walker's Pond. And anybody got a preference for a date on this?
October works for me.
Pardon me, Susan?
October works for me.
The first weekend in October? Okay, would that work? There's a Saturday and a Sunday. You want me to check weather? I don't know if I can go in that far. But we could either say Saturday, and if it's raining, go Sunday.
Sure.
People are too quiet. I need help, please.
Good idea.
Do you want me to do a doodle poll? Do you want me to do a doodle poll? Or do you just want to right now?
If people say they would like to do the first weekend in October, then I think we could just say Saturday and rain date Sunday. I don't know enough about people's plans. That's all I'm saying. Or do you just want to pick a date, and if it's pouring rain, you bring an umbrella? I don't know.
As it stands now, Saturday and Sunday are sunny in the 60s, but subject to change.
Tomorrow?
Excuse me?
Is that the day after tomorrow that you're reading?
No, that's the first weekend in October.
Oh, great.
That sound good for everybody?
No, Saturday it's going to be 80 this weekend. That would be very nice.
So, and like in the morning?
Yep.
Yes, that would be either Saturday, October 3rd, or Sunday the 4th. Do people have a preference? I could do either one.
Either's fine with me.
I think it makes what you said, that we go Saturday, and if it rains, we go Sunday rain date.
It's fine with me.
Okay.
What time would people like to meet at the mansion? 10 o'clock? 11 o'clock? John, people prefer morning or afternoon? We have the porch meetings now because it's warmer on my porch in the afternoon. The sun is there. So any preference for time?
How about 11? Maybe it'll be a little warmer by
A little
11.
warmer.
Yes.
Okay, so shall we
All right.
say 11 o'clock? I don't know if people want to bring their paramours, your kids, or just keep it to the committee. I thought about that too. It's nice to go walking around, but you know, or it's just the committee. But and our little info walk, I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
Part of looking at Zoom. I want to see people. Okay.
I think
right.
just the committee would be preferable, given the still people are a little like, you know, it's harder to keep physical distancing with the more people there are.
Okay, good point, Maria. All right, so we're going to shoot for Saturday, October 3rd, 11 a.m. And if it looks like really bad weather, we can recalibrate. Super. I'm trying to think, do we have anything else? I think that's wrapped up for right now, unless, oh, sorry, Mark.
Yeah, on the discussion of the update on the CPA plan, do we have any sort of rough deadlines we're thinking about?
We can't hear you, Mark. Now you're muted. Can you put up your volume a bit? Can you turn up your volume?
Right, that's here. Can you hear me better?
That's better.
Okay. On the CPA plan update, do we have any deadlines we're thinking of?
Well, when we talked about the open space, I believe that Leo and Patrick wanted about 2 weeks, which we had that meeting on
Monday.
Monday.
Yeah.
So that would be around October 5th that they felt that they would have enough time to really put this together. I can certainly have some portion together, or, you know, if we have the application that's further along, we can deal with that. I don't know. I mean, we all want this to be a quality Watertown piece, not this generic thing that we got. And Lene, what are you thinking?
Well, I wasn't thinking about a specific drop dead date, because like you said, we want this to be a quality piece and give people the time they need. On the other hand, we don't want it to drag out on and on. I mean, I was thinking that Marcia would be able to start getting at least pieces like the application manual in October by, you know, mid-October. And I was hoping that we could have something to review for a meeting in late October, on our next meeting, for all the sections.
Right. Is that, Mark, we can't hear you again. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So I don't want to drag this on because it's been such a long meeting, but one other conversation that should happen is to make sure that the different sections in which we elaborate on the historic and the recreation and open space and so on are all kind of similar. Obviously the text and the images will be different, but that the format will be similar. And if we are moving out of that 2-page graphic that I think people find a little cluttered or a little difficult, I guess it would be useful to probably have a common approach.
Yeah, Lene did send out an outline to everybody, which is basically the common approach as far as the plan goes.
Okay, I'll check that out. I've been focusing.
I mean, it's the same kind of an overview, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but she sent it out to each group essentially. Okay. You were away, Susan, so you maybe haven't had enough time to connect, but Mark took that approach because one of our big concerns throughout the plan, there was no potential projects listed. You know, nothing was listed there or potential priorities. So Leo and Patrick are working in the same way. They had the form that Lene had put together, and okay. Leo had started on that. And just because of the material that Leo was looking at, it really became like, we have to put it together. It's basically, while they're 2 separate categories, 10% goes to those two
exactly
two
yep.
groups, and just the way our town is. We're different, and we have to accept that, and we're trying to work it that way. Any other questions?
I don't think I saw that either. So if, and maybe it's because I'm not working on that part of this project, but I would love to see that also.
Okay, I'm sure, John. You know, part of the thing is we're trying not to overwhelm people with every single piece of information. Like I've stayed out of what everybody's doing with the application just because, you know, you're working as a team on that. When you get ready with a project that or rough draft, we can all look at it. You know, same kind of thing with this. And I hear what Susan is saying. The content sections were there, but once we put it together, the language might need some massaging in terms of sounding like it's a holistic document, if you know what I mean. Because we know what we went through and just trying to write a simple letter that never got off the ground. So I think that's going to be a little bit complicated, but we can do it. I have faith.
I have a question. I thought that the two-page handout we're talking about, or whatever you want to call it, I didn't think it was being scrapped. I thought it was just being reworked.
That was my impression also.
Okay.
I think it depends on the section. That basically it was pretty much scrapped for the housing section because we got some updated information from Larry from the housing production plan. So, and for the other sections, I think for open space, it's also, it's pretty much being reworked. So we're not using most of the information in that one. I think for historic, it was after you had rewritten that, you had done several drafts. So I think that's in pretty good shape. So it could follow the outline of having an overview, existing conditions, or, you know, what are the existing properties with a little description about them, and then the goals and potential projects.
We were trying to present a bit more of a narrative with better pictures, clearer aspirations, you know, kind of where is Watertown stand now? And you did a lot of work on that historical page, Susan, and it's a lot clearer. But when we looked at the housing and we kept going back and forth and it was so jumbled and people didn't understand the statistics and what was happening. And so Larry's been working on all this stuff for the housing partnership. And then he handed us a document. He sent a document that, you know, Mark could look at, I could look at, Lene, and it's like, oh God, thank God. Because here was some really clean content. And then, you know, Mark reworked it for what Lene had done, you know, this outline. So I think we're on track. And by the time we get to our October meeting, you know, we can meet in between that, but I think we're on track for that. So Lene, if you want to just send out the general outline of what we're doing for those areas, that may help you understand what we're trying to do. Because
okay.
I'm enamored of the jammed up little pages, and especially with this postage stamp photo. So we're giving it some breathing room, and really bringing out what's Watertown, you know, because we're different. We're different. So does that help people? You know, you're always free to call Lene in between. If you have a question, you can call me too, but we've had some great porch discussions, which gave us a whole different view of this. And I think now we got some pros involved that really know our town, and, you know, it's different, quite different. If that's it for tonight, I'm ready to ask for a motion to adjourn unless somebody else has a question or a concern.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Got a second?
Second.
All right, Lene, can you do roll?
So that was John who moved, right?
John wants to go.
And then who seconded?
Alan.
Jason? Oh, Alan? Okay. You want to go too, Alan? Okay.
Okay. Got it. All right. I will call the roll here. So where's my roll? Where is it? I lost it. Oh, it's hiding behind here. Here we go. John Bockian?
Yes.
Jason Cohen?
Yes.
Bob DeRico?
Yes.
Dennis Duff?
Yes.
Alan Gallagher?
Yes.
Mark Kreskevich?
Mark?
Yes.
Okay.
You have a volume thing on your computer. It doesn't come up.
No, I'm sitting way back from my screen.
Oh, okay.
Maria Rose,
Yes.
Susan Steele,
Yes.
Elodia Thomas.
Yes, thank you. So I'm so looking forward to seeing my masked faces on October 3rd at 11 at the Commander's Mansion. So that would be really great. Thank you, everyone. We're moving along. I really appreciate it.